what is the view on the evolution of company culture as a result of normalizing remote work? Some companies are concerned about culture being diluted. I know other companies really want to take advantage of this time to make some changes they've been wanting to make for many years in their culture. And I know you had a whole session on this. So what insights can you share?
Yeah, so I think I can answer that question from a few different perspectives. One is thinking about building and maintaining culture in the long run. And so, some organizations talked about identifying days that or times that we're all going to be together and being intentional about how we're spending it. Organizations talked about using having these sort of culture boosters, even when people are remote, to make sure that we're connecting in a meaningful way. Um, some people talked about using identifying best practices from their field organizations with employees who were never coming into the office regularly. They've managed to bring people in, socialize them, kind of build and maintain culture. So if they can do it, maybe, we can bring that into other types of work where we haven't always done that. So another way that I read this question, and I don't know if, it was intended from this perspective as well. Another thing that came up was this fact that employees and leaders, not treating them as, two separate perspectives, but employees and leaders just across the board as individuals may have very different ideas about what the culture should be in the organization moving forward. So there was sort of the pre-pandemic, this is the way we do things and what's important to us. And then there was the time during the pandemic, and many organizations made a really concerted effort to make sure they're maintaining their values, but things change. Our relationships change, the way we work together changed in this time. And so there are very different expectations among different employees and leaders of what does it mean when we're coming back together. Certainly, we can't expect to go back to the way it used to be, although we probably also can't expect that we're just going to carry on as we have during the pandemic. And so there's some questions about what does this mean for, change management, and where do I guess starting out, where do people fall? Well, what are people's expectations, and then how do we manage that to get to where we want to be moving ahead?
I think that Becky hit on a lot of great points. I always come back to the question of what do you mean by culture? So is culture the 5 S's of our values? Is it what does our leadership model say? Right. So that a lot of that stuff I think is pre-programmed, right? And so changing that big culture without changing your values or changing your leadership model, I think you have to, it's always been the basics of how do you pervade a culture, is how do leaders behave? What's the norms we have? But then there's the little c of culture, which is, what is how do we get work done in this office? What is how do we get work done in this particular job? So, why is it so easy for field salespeople to quickly adapt to our culture? I don't know if they are adapting to our culture if they're just salespeople, right? So we have to really rethink this idea of what is culture. And if it's the big values, I'm not sure how many of these companies want to change their values, because I think most of them really believe in their values. It's how do those values come to life in the office? And if it's around, fairness and working together collaboratively, then it's, again, it comes back to the leader of how that leader helps to bring those values to life on their team. And that's the big one to me, is it comes back to the leadership of the organization and how they're acting as leaders, and how do they bring the values to life on the team.